Assalamu alaikum students, welcome to your TEFL 2. Welcome to another important course, an important topic that we are going to start today. And you know that now we are about to finish our course. Today we are going to start lecture number 28. So we have done with 27 lectures so far, and I am sure things are clear to you. And I am telling you that at the end of this course, the last lecture, I'll try to review whatever we decided to do in the very first lecture, right? So that is a very important lecture. I want you to do listen to that lecture as well, right? So let's start today's lecture, and today's lecture is, you can see on the screen, CAL, right? What is computer? Yes, I mean computer assisted language learning, or the title on the screen is using computers in language classroom. Yes, a very important area. You know that now the computer has become part and parcel of our life, part and parcel of every activity that we perform, that we do, and computer has made things very simple for us. So considering the importance of the computer, let's see how computer can help us in teaching a language. So we have a topic, that is how to use computer in the language classrooms. Before we start this important lecture, let's review the previous lecture that we had. That was lecture 27. So what did we do in that lecture, students? Yes, we discussed how to use, books, in fact, the course books for language teaching. And if you remember that we discussed that course books are pre-packaged, published books, right, used by the students and teachers as the primary, in fact, source for language teaching. You know that, of course, the teaching requires lots of activities, and the course books that are decided by the university, by the institution, really help the learner and also assist the teacher in the language teaching process. So we had a detailed discussion on this area, that what are the important course books and how can we exploit those textbooks or the course books in language teaching the process. And we had a discussion that you see some people are for this proposition that textbooks really help in language teaching, and there are some people who are against it. So we discussed this area, and finally we decided in the last lecture that yes, course books are really effective if they are used properly, and if both the teacher and the student realize the importance of the course books. And then we discussed principles for using our course books. We discussed that understand how the course book is organized. It's very important. The contents of a course book is a map for the teacher and also for the students. So being a teacher of a foreign language, when you have a course book with you have to see the contents of that book, right? So those contents, in fact, help you in making your lesson plan, and those, in fact, that map that you have, of course, the list of contents help you which area to be focused on and which area to be rejected. And you remember we talked about SARS, S-A-R-S, and S we discussed that stands for select. Mean when you have the course book to be used in language teaching, you have to select a part of it, right? So it is not hard and fast that you have to take every component of the course book that you have decided to use in language class, or your management, your administrators have given that book to you. So you have to select, being a language teacher, select the best part. What parts of the course books do you definitely want to keep, right? That part of the course book you want to keep and you want to use in the class, and then adapt that part of the course. And how would you adapt? What part of the course book do you basically want to keep but need to change in some way to make more suitable for the students. You know that of course there are students, right, and students from different, they come from different backgrounds, they have a different cultural, the background. So you have to adapt things about a textbook which was written, which was organized in another culture, and if you have to adapt that culture, if you have to adapt the part of a book in local culture, so you have to adapt it accordingly, right? So that's why the SARS, select the part of the book that you want to use it or you want to keep it, and then you see what you do, you adapt that part in the local culture and in the environment where you are teaching language. For example, we teach language in Pakistan, so if you are using BBC Stage 1 or BBC Stage 2, so you have to adapt those activities in the local culture, in the local environment. And then we saw that some parts of the book you may reject, right? Again, why you reject a part of a book and why you adapt or select. Some parts of the book may not be suitable for the local culture, for the environment where you are teaching the language, right? For example, a beach activity is there, so here we don't have that environment. We don't go to beach for that sunbasking activities. So we can in fact tell the students about that, but we can if you want to, you can reject this part because that is not suitable for our local culture. So some parts can be selected, some parts can be adapted, and of course some parts of the book can be rejected. And then what we have, S for supplement, that what else do you need to bring to the course book, right? You can bring a handout, you can bring an article, you can bring in fact a table, you can bring a realia. So again, SARS, SARS mean to support the content, to support your part that you have selected and adapted. You see, you can supplement it with a piece of with a handout, with the realia or whatever you find it easy. So this was, again, we talked about that. You see what we do, prepare the learner, right? When you use a book, when you use a course book for language teaching, preparation of a learner is important, and what you do, you need to prepare the learner for it. You need to motivate the learner. His physical preparation, the mental preparation of a learner is important if you intend to use that part of a course book. Then monitor and follow up the activities which are going on in the class. Being a teacher of a foreign language, you have to monitor things, right? And for that, you see, you can keep an eye on the students, whatever activity is being done, how activities are done, what are the problems being faced by the students, and how can we address those problems. These things you have to monitor, right? And then of course build a repertoire, right? What is repertoire? It can be a database, it can be a diary, it can be a book that you have where you keep on updating, you keep on writing things, right? So this repertoire, my dear students, definitely helps you in your future teaching, right? This repertoire, in fact, where you have taken down things for the future reference, right? So dear students, these are some of the points that you need to keep in mind when you are planning to use a course book in your language teaching program. So what are the classroom techniques and tasks we discussed? Survey or map the territory, in fact, group prioritizing, personalizing, and format shift, in fact. So these are also some of the activities that we can use while using a course book in language teaching language, English as a foreign language. So you can prioritize a group, or you can personalize thing, right? Particularly teaching to the business students, this personalization really works, and of course, the formal shift is equally important. So these are some of the techniques that you must keep in mind when you are planning to use a course book. So again, selection of a course book is important. You can seek guidance from the experts, in fact, people who teach language or who have been teaching language for more than 5 years, 6 years. They are in the know. These people know the best books available in the market. And again, you can seek guidance from the teachers, right? And how do they use those books in the class? And once you seek guidance, once you get help from the teachers, you can add value to it, right? Because the best part is that what you add to it, your contribution to that, the course book that you have chosen for language teaching program. So dear students, these are some of the ways that we talked in detail in the last lecture, and we discussed how to use a course book, and how can we select a part of it, and how can we adapt to it, and how can reject a part of it, and how can we supplement this. This is what we talked about. So let's start today's lecture, that is called CALL, right? And I told you earlier that how to use computer in language classroom. So I mean, this is what is CALL. You must have heard this name, CALL, right? So computer assisted language learning, right? What is it? Computer assisted language learning. We'll be talking about this later on. So any process in which a learner uses a computer and as a result improves his or her language. So see, this is what the CALL is. That I mean the computer aided language learning or computer assisted language learning. In simple words, use of computer to improve your language. If I use computer to browse different websites, to find out different language learning websites, and I use those websites for my improvement and to improve my language, so that is what CALL. So this is what mean in simple words. It's a process in which a learner of a foreign language, what he does, that he uses computer, and why, as a result of that computer usage, he or she tries to learn the language. So it is closely related to many other disciplines and of course the computers. So CALL is an important element for teaching and learning, right? And I told you earlier that the computer has become an important part of life these days. Wherever you go, things are done on computer, right? And so is the case that when it comes to language teaching, so again, computer in fact helps us a lot in the language teaching process and of course language learning process, right? So that's why CALL has become an integrated, of course, into research on fine. That's what the CALL has become an important part of language teaching process, again language learning process. If you see in the slide that CALL has become integrated into research, right, and on the practice of the journal skills, reading skills, speaking skill, writing and listening skill, essential skill you could say, right? And CALL is a popular both in and out of the classroom, right? Once you are in, right, you can use this computer in your language teaching, right? So it is an important part of your what, the classroom teaching. If you have access to internet, right, you can show the website to the students directly, right? And of course, of the class, once the students go out, they can use computer to improve their language, right? There are some terms that you might have heard. So just for your, to remind you, to refresh you, there are some terms and acronyms you must know. That first one is computer aided instruction, right? So here that is first computer aided language learning, right? Second one is computer assisted language learning. Fine. Third one is computer assisted language instruction. Computer instructed, CALI. Computer assisted language instruction. Then computer assisted language teaching or testing. Can you see, students? Yes, computer assisted language teaching or testing. There are some terms here. Computer adapted teaching or testing, right? We discussed earlier that while using course books, so a part of the course book, what we do, we adapt it, and we also saw that some part of the books or the course book we reject. So here what we do, that we have of course an acronym, that is computer adapted teaching or testing, and then computer based training, fine, that is CBT, and third one is computer mediated communication, CNC, and finally of course intelligent computer assisted language learning, right? So this is I for intelligent, and then computer assisted language learning. These are some of the terms, acronyms that you need to know, right? And if you see these terms, the core area is that the use of computer, right? That how can we use computer to learn language, how can we use computer to teach language, and how computer can be used as a mediator. In fact, like we saw that computer mediated communication, where computer mediates, right? And then again we saw that computer adaptive teaching or testing. And this, I'm sure you people know that nowadays computer is being used to conduct this different tests, right? Like if you another like now online program is there. So universities offering online program, the virtual programs, in fact. So over there, how these programs are being offered and how these programs are being executed. So again, computer works. Virtual university is the best example. Virtual ComSat, in fact, again. So through computer, what happens that you see, you have your lectures on your DVDs. You listen to those lectures, and then of course you prepare for the paper. Then of course you be in contact with your university, and then you keep on responding, replying. And finally, in fact, you complete your course. So computer adaptive teaching, where computer is in fact mean. And then we saw that computer based training, CBT, in fact, the training which is based on computer. So all these acronyms or the terms that we have talked about. So I told you that the computer plays a key role, right? So in some cases it is computer based instruction, and in some areas it is computer mediated communication. And then again, of course, what do we have? Intelligent computer assisted language teaching. This is what CAL is. Now let's see the background to teaching with CAL. Is very important area. That what is the background? If you go back, in fact, and see that how the computer has come into language teaching, what is the background, right? And of course, like you see, if you talk about the computer, there was a time that we used to have 286, 386, 486, and P1, and so on and so forth. And now, of course, we have the latest computers available, right? So let's see how computer in fact started helping us in language teaching process. So the Scala language classroom evolved with the computer technology. It's very common thing that, of course, once the technologies started improving, and then of course we also the experts tried to use it for this language teaching process and of course language learning process. So in some language classroom, CAL is relatively unchanged from the behavioral directives of the 1950s. Now again, if you go back, of course, the behavioral theory, right, where that of course language is learned through drills, through activities. The more you drill, the more you learn. So this one means that not in all, but in some language classrooms, this computer assisted language learning is relatively unchanged from the behavioral directives. If you go back to 1950s, the most traditional and still common form of CAL programs are behaviorist computer-based gap-fill drills. Now here again there are drills, but now we have adapted. You see, we discussed in the last semester as well that through drills you learn more. That language is learned through drills. The more you drill, the more you learn, in fact. So here, once you apply that, of course, behavioral approach in this computer, or in other words, you try to mediate computer in the behavioral directives. So we come to know that these programs are behaviorist computer-based gap-fill drills. So in computer-based gap-fill drills, learners answer questions or fill in information in closed exercises. Like you see, there are so many exercises available on your computer, right, where key or random words have been used, replaced with the spaces. The approach is closely associated with B.F. Skinner, this one, right? So nowadays, of course, you just browse any website and you will find lots of exercises, you will find lots of closed tests, right? Whatever activity you look for, it is available, and you can use that for language learning process. And of course, if you want to teach language, you can use that for language teaching as well. So these, what we call them, the computer based gap fill drills, right, they are important, right? And again, through lot, and if you, the concept is that the concept that the language is learned through drills. The more you drill, the more you learn, right? So here now we use, in fact, the computer for the drills, right? On the computer you have lots of drills are there. I mean, once you browse that website, you open that website, and you can download those in fact the activities and you can practice, and definitely you learn. This approach emphasized rote learning along with the techniques of mimicry and memorization to repetitive drills, right? So again, the approach is that what you mimic, in fact, right, and also you try to memorize through lots of drills, and these are repetitive drills. Learners are rewarded with small positive responses, often including the right to move to a new level of drill. So of course, on computer, when you do something well, so there is a message that well done, right? Please move on to the next exercise. So again, there is a response, right? If you get good score in an exercise on internet, so what happens that there is a message appears on the screen that you have done a good job. Now move on to the next phase. However, if you are unable to, in fact, get good score in an exercise or in a drill, so suggestions are given that you can go back and practice more, right? So of course there are lots of exercises. Of course, these exercises are meant to in fact to improve your areas, so that once you move to the next area, your previous area, of course previous area should be firm, right? I mean, after grasping one area, after knowing one exercise, you move on to the next one. So therefore here, of course, lots of activities are there on the computer, and if you do well, there is a response for you. Well done, keep it up, 90% marks, 80% marks. So this is what you see, right? If you have an internet connection, of course, and you have access to different website, and if you know different websites, then so things can easily be done. And there are lots of drills as well, right? And when you perform drill with the computer, of course, I mean, here the good thing is that you don't need a second person, of course, another individual to do those drills. You have a computer in front of you, so computer acts as another student, in fact. And the good thing is that the computer keeps on directing you, right? Whenever you do well, the computer in fact appreciates you, and whenever you are unable to do something, the computer in fact give you some suggestions. So in this way, my dear students, of course, we move on. That of course the background of this SCAL, I mean, it goes to behavioral approach. Now again, if you see that Skinner's behaviorist theories found practical applications in programmed instruction or programmed learning, in fact. So Skinner, B.F. Skinner, of course, I mean, a behaviorist, right? You know it is the name, of course. And then what happens? That found practical application in programmed instruction. Well, students, so we're talking about B.F. Skinner. And now moving on to Skinner's 1968 suggested that a machine was ahead of its time. Who said this? I mean, Skinner, of course, gave the view that he rather suggested that the machine was ahead of its time, but supported the idea of machine instruction as a way of increasing learner autonomy to avoid an essential problem, right? The pace of instruction in a group of learners whose comprehension and learning rates are at different level, right? This is what Skinner suggested. So beyond behaviorism, psychologist F.C. Bartlett first proposed the idea of schema theory in 1932. Schema theory we talked about in the last semester as well, that there is a schema, of course, of every learner, right? And Noonan in 1993 defines schema theory as what? A theory of language processing which suggests that discourse is interpreted with reference to the background knowledge of the reader or listener. This is very important, and this is, I mean, who says this? Noonan has said that a schema theory is what? It's a theory of language processing, that we process language which suggests that discourse is interpreted with reference to the background knowledge of the reader or what listener. That whenever you process language, you cannot process language if you exclude your background knowledge, right? So that's why the Noonan is of the view that, of course, when you process language, so we always interpret language in our social schema, right? In the environment where we live in the environment where we perform. So this is what Noonan's, in fact, viewpoint on schema theory. So this one is, in fact, one Skinner's viewpoint. So again we move on to constructivism from this behavioral approach, right, where maybe we saw that drills are important for language learning, the process. So once you have more drills, the language learning process becomes habit formation, right? And you perform, I mean, drills in such a way, right, that you see you can express yourself extemporaneously, right? And those drills, in fact, help you of course help you in gaining fluency. If you drill more, you become more fluent, right? Now from that, of course, we have just talked about schema theory, and then we refer to David Noonan, and Noonan says that the schema theory is what? That we always interpret language, we process language in our social domain, right? And whatever our domain is, whatever our environment is, we process language accordingly. So moving on to constructivism. So schema theory is the foundation of constructivism, right? Here, I mean, the simple word that you construct an idea. And how do you construct? Again, you see that what we have just talked about, the schema theory, and that's, we say that schema theory is foundation stone, is what basics of what constructivism. Now what is constructive approach? A software program draws on the expertise of the learner and builds on it, offering multiple paths of inquiry and different ways of looking at the same problem or challenge. This is what a constructive approach, right? So what you do in this constructive approach, that you try to see things differently, right? So that's why it's an approach. A software program draws on the expertise of the learner and builds on it, offering multiple paths of inquiry, right, and different ways of looking at same problem or challenge. A typical constructive program involves the learner in a kind of a quest in which the teaching and learning objectives are achieved, almost as peripheral consequence of completing some other tasks. So this is what, my dear student, is constructive approach. That you see in simple words, constructive approach talks about the learner's, in fact, repertoire, the learner's expertise, in which what he does, that he, in fact, he handles things, right, in different way. And it's very common that whenever there is a problem, and the person would see that problem differently. People see problems differently, right? So people handle problems differently. Some become more rational and some become irrational. In fact, some people analyze a problem, identify a problem, they find the best solutions, and then they suggest some answers, right? So this is what constructivism talks about, that you see there are different ways and means to see problems. So this is what means that a typical constructivist program involves the learner in a kind of a quest, right? That you quest something in which the teaching and learning objectives are achieved almost as a peripheral consequences of completing some other tasks. Now students, in fact, moving on to that, what are the principles for teaching CAL? Very important area. That now I'm sure you people would be using computer for your language teaching process, and of course you are using it for language learning process. So there are the principles that we can discuss in this lecture that would help you, in fact. But the point is, the good thing is that of course you could explore more principles, right? That how well we can use a computer for language teaching process. So the first thing is that evaluate the appropriateness of the software program or computer-based resources. Whatever software that you are planning to use for language teaching, or the game that you are planning to use, or website, you have to see its appropriacy. You have to evaluate the appropriacy of that software program. So for that, what do we do? Expertise. A learner who determine what they know, do not know about the task, are more like to engage in productive work. So expertise of the teacher is also important, and of course expertise of the learner, because for language teaching process, the learner of course is the central hub, right? We teach language to help our learner. In fact, we teach language to our students. Our job is to help facilitate the learner, right? So if the learner is benefited, of course the software is successful, and if the learner is not benefited, of course, and the learner is unable to learn language to that software, which means that, you see, the software, maybe software has some problems, or the teaching in fact has some loopholes. That's why expertise of the learner, they are important. So and of course, because it's very natural that sometimes you use computer in the language teaching process, but the learners in fact do not know the basics of computer. So in this way it can be a problem. Motivation again is important, right? The learners are usually faced with extrinsic motivation and manufacture intrinsic motivation when it suits them. So again, there is a fear also among some the learners. They feel that how come the computer is part of the language in the classroom. So being teachers, you have to remove this fear, you have to motivate them, you have to tell them that the computer is an important source for language teaching and learning, right? So motivation of the learner is important. Once they are motivated, so they would take keen interest in this language learning process through computers, and they would be motivated to learn the language more. And again, once they have developed this interest and once they have understood the importance of computers, so I feel that of course in their free time, once they will go back to their homes, they would be using computers on their own, and they would be improving language. And in this way the teacher would be less burdened, I feel, because once the learners would be independent and they would know how to use computers, and they can explore different website of language teaching process, of language learning process, so they would be doing things on their own. And if they have developed real taste in that, so after in their free time they would put more efforts. So teachers and learners need to create motivation through establishing goals and understanding how CAL activities can help achieve them, right? So again, mean the activities that we design of course for the classroom, and there are so many activities which have been uploaded, which have been on internet, and learners can use those activities to improve their skills. Objectives of the program, right? I mean, evaluating the appropriacy, you need to know what are the objectives of the program. Is it clear what the program aims to accomplish in terms of learning? Are these objectives realistic, right? So when we use computer for language learning process or language teaching process, so you need to know the objectives. Of course, if the computer helps achieving those objectives, so it's realistic. And if the computer fails to achieve those objectives, so it means you need to redo it. Target audience. Much target material is aimed at specific audience. Business people are primary students, right? So therefore you need to know the audience. In fact, that you need to understand that of course computer is in need of the hour, and the students would be in the market, and they would be using computers for various the purposes. The business students, they would be using computers, right? Linguistic students, they'll be using computers. So of course the target audience must be kept in mind, and accordingly they need to be facilitated, right? Then of course cognitive overhead. How difficult is it to use the program, right? Because there are so many softwares out there, so many programs out there that at times you see you cannot use them, right? So you need to understand while evaluating the appropriacy of the program for language teaching process, is it easy to use or it is difficult to use? If it is easy, if it is easily manageable, you can use that. If it is not, you need to think over it. So cognitive overhead is important, right? Cost, is the program worth it, right? Pedagogical approach, is the program behaviorist or constructivist, right? Is the program in fact focuses on drills, or if the program in fact motivates the learners to explore or to quest, right? So these are what we call them cognitive overhead. So my dear student, this is what we say what we do, that we evaluate appropriacy level of the software that we use, or in other words, we need to evaluate the appropriacy level of the computer, of course, soft program that you use it. Then again, authenticity is important. Well, students, authenticity is another principle, in fact, for language teaching, particularly, of course, for when you use CAL for the language teaching process. So does the program make use of authentic material and situation? This is again important, right? Because sometimes, of course, you have some softwares, you have material on the internet, but you feel that that may not be very, very authentic. So here the point is that, of course, selection of the websites for language teaching must be authentic. Simple word that, of course, the government websites for information, yes, they are considered authentic. Research articles, of course, they are considered authentic. Not every piece of information that has been uploaded is what? Authentic. So that's why when we're using computer for language teaching process or the language learning process, so you need to understand, you need to know its authenticity, that does the program make use of authentic material and situations? Do these materials relate to the experience of the learner? So again, the need analysis of course, the learner that we have done is important. We need to know that is it worth using in the class? Is it really useful for the learners, right? Or is it something which is not? Which is for our environment, which may not work well. So that's why authenticity is an important principle for using CAL in language classroom, right? Feedback again is important principle for language teaching. The feedback, how does the program offer feedback? Again, it's important that sometimes you get the feedback through your email, right? Sometimes what you do, that you attempt some exercises, and of course you send and you give your email address and you get the feedback. And sometimes you get the quick feedback the moment you complete the test and you press the enter and your score appears on the screen, on the window. So again, the feedback is there, right? Of course, some the CAL softwares immediate give response immediately, and some the CAL softwares or the programs take time, in fact. Role of the learner and teacher is important. Of course, there is another the principle for using CAL in language the teaching, that the teacher should be well equipped, the teacher should be well aware, the teacher should know how to use that software, and then he need to inculcate this thing to the learner. So both the teacher and the learner, in fact, must play their roles professionally, right? And if they play their roles professionally, then the computer can in fact definitely help them improve the teaching and learning of language respectively. So both, the teacher and the learner must come forward, in fact must help, in fact in this process. What is expected of the learner, in fact, as far as the learner is concerned? So we expect from the learner that he should, in fact, take keen interest in learning language through computers, and the learner must not fear of using computers, and the learner, in fact, should be constructive, right? His approach should be constructive, that whenever there is a plan, whenever there is a software, so the learner should come forward, right? What is expected of the teacher, in fact, being the teacher, of course, when you are using a program, so you need to know how to use it first of all, and of course if you have that software with you, you need to understand, right, that what are the advantages of using this program and what are the disadvantages of using this program, and above all how to execute this program successfully. And then of course once you have to use that program, you need to keep in mind your target audience. So keeping the target audience in mind, you try to execute it, and the best approach is that you do a pilot study before using that program in your before taking that software to your language class. So this is important, right? Self-study of classroom, of course, is the program intended for self-study or classroom use. Of course, there are some softwares which in fact help the learners in their self-study. In fact, like in some good schools, when the teacher discusses a topic, then the teacher in fact refers different websites to the students, and the student attempt those websites, attempt those exercises or quizzes online. So again, that is a good way, in fact, that after discussing a topic in the class, the teacher in fact refers students to different websites, different in fact of course softwares where students could go home and they use those softwares, and of course their concepts become more clear. Technological appropriateness again is important. Does the program require extra hardware or software to make it work efficiently? That of course, when you use the CAL for language teaching process, of course sometimes we need more hardware. In fact, for example, there was a time the people didn't differentiate between this DVD and CD, right? And before that, even of course, you know that of course CD and what the disk, in fact, or the floppy disk and the USB. So these are some ways, my dear students, that you need to understand. We call them technological appropriateness. Does the program require extra hardware or software, of course, to make it work efficiently? Is that clear? These are some of the principles, of course, that there are the principles for what? Teaching language, in fact, or using computers in a classroom, and we use the term CAL, computer aided language learning. So in simple words, you being teacher, you need to know what is the software, what is its importance, how it can be used, and what are its advantages, what are its disadvantages. So these points you need to keep in mind, right, when you have to use a software, in fact, right? And of course you need to improve, you need to motivate your learners, so that once they discuss a topic in the class, and they would go back home and they would attempt things on their own. Another principle is create an environment in which CAL is supported. Again, it's important, right? Of course, because that this fear of using the computer must be must be shunned, must be removed from the learners. Particularly, my dear students, when you teach language, when you use computer in an environment where it is not in, right, and where computer is a new, of course, technology. So over there, of course, you have to adapt it accordingly. In fact, so you have to create an environment in which CAL is of course supported, and you can ask your administrators to provide you with computers, you provide you with internet connection. Arrange the CAL classrooms to maximize interaction. Again, it's important, because of course other realia, of course other objects are there, teaching aids are there that can be used for maximum interaction. But I feel that if computer gives you a lot, computer of course has a lot on the screen, and you can use that for maximum interaction, right? Ensure easy access to CAL. In fact, this is important, that whatever the software you are using in the class, right, whatever the program that is you are using, of course, ensure easy accessibility of that program to the students. Of course, if it is not accessible, then you may not use it, right? Or you can think of some plans to make it accessible to the students. Sometimes it happens that a software, of course, maybe you have access being a teacher, but if your learners have no access to it, so that things can be problematic. So of course, use the software which is easily accessible to all, right? And once it is accessible to all, then they can exploit it accordingly, in fact. So therefore, that is an environment in which CAL is supported, of course, important. Another principle is, of course, for teaching the CAL, my dear students, that monitor learner participation in CAL programs and encourage autonomy, right? Because definitely once the learner is in front of the computer, when there is software is there, or there is a website, so of course this in fact ensures autonomy of the learner. We'll have a lecture on learner's autonomy, in fact, maybe after 2 or 3 lectures. So once you see, and how can you have this autonomy of the learner in this CAL program, my dear students? You can simply motivate the students, and you can help, you can guide them initially, and of course make them independent. Of course, remove this fear that the computer is a difficult, of course, device, a difficult technology, right? You need to remove this fear of the students. Determine roles. In fact, when learner works together at the computer, they often select roles for themselves. So again, it's important. There are 2 exercises, exercise A and B, so you can give roles, of course. A, Ali, and B is what? Bilal. Encourage responsibility. There is a seldom enough time or resources for comprehensively learning a language in the classroom, so that's why you have to encourage responsibility. This is very important, right? So dear students, here are some of the principles for teaching CAL. Monitor learner participation in CAL programs, determine roles, encourage responsibility, right? And this is what is very important, that you can use it. Another principle is encourage use of the CAL program as a starting point for collaboration and learner interaction, right? Definitely, it's course, it's just a computer. So we discussed that computer mediated teaching, right? Computer assisted language teaching. So once in fact, of course, we use the computer for in the language class, or we use this computer, in fact, of course, particularly through internet, when you use it. So what happens? You see, you collaborate with the people around. You make, in fact, you make teams, you make groups. You can interact people wherever you want to. So this is what encourage your students, right? That this programs as a starting point for collaboration. You can talk people wherever you want to, right? So if you can, through computer, in fact, you can express your views. You can share your problems, of course. And if you have access, if you have email address of different the teachers, and through website you can do that, right? And of course, our interaction, encourage collaboration. Have learners use the computer as an area for brainstorming. This is made more effective as the learner simultaneously search for information to aid in discussion. This is important, right, students? So that's why, of course, you need to encourage collaboration. You need to help the students to make groups. For example, social media is there, Facebook is there, of course, different websites are there. So help students making groups, help students sharing their information, help students, in fact, sharing the problems, in fact. So being teacher, what can we do? We can encourage the students for the use of computer for language learning process, and of course for being teachers, we can make our groups where we can help each other. You can have your websites, right, on internet. You can upload your websites, right? You can have your blogs, right? So through blogs you can communicate a lot. Through your website you can communicate a lot. So this help the learners to collaborate. Now, of course, once you are using the CAL for the language teaching process, you need to understand what are the classroom techniques and tasks that we can use, of course, in CAL. So there are several taxonomies to classify CAL techniques. One taxonomy offered by Chandler, 1984, is based on how much control there is between the program and the learner. That, of course, user-friendly is a term that we use, that whatever program we select for language teaching process or language learning process, right, of course, the developer of that program tries to keep it user-friendly, right? And sometimes the learner cannot decide. So the teachers, of course, is their job, it is their profession, so they can decide that which software is easy to use, which software is user-friendly, or which software is difficult. And again, you know that, of course, the teacher can make things easy if the software is complex to use. So teacher can come forward and he can guide students to help you out. So, for example, you have this softwares, of course, you have this programs, for example, tutorials, hospital model, user as patient, in fact, right? You can have, of course, like simply you can visit a hospital and you see there is a program, there is a software, we call it, and through this software, of course, questions are asked and there are replies to them as well. You are a patient, you ask, the computer asks you for your name, you write your name, computer asks you for your CNIC number, you give your CNIC number, of course, computer asks you for your address, you give your address number. Like the old way was the manual way of that issuing chits, but now it has been automated, right? And then you have the games, funfair model, user as emulator, right? Simulation games, drama model, user as role player, right? Experimental simulations, laboratory model, user as what? User as a tester. Then content free tools, resources, center model, user as artist or researcher. Programming language, workshops model, user as what? Inventor. So these are some of the, of course, you can see there are some techniques that you can use in CAL, of course, and every day you visit bank, you visit a hospital, you go to a shop, you go to a grocery store, and you see the computer. In fact, so there are different programs being used, right? And of course you can, in fact, you can have this activity in the class when you teach a foreign language. Internet, there are some examples. If you go back, there are some examples of simple call techniques and programs. For example, internet treasure hunt. Really important. You can ask the students to hunt something, in fact, right? And we call it internet treasure hunt, in fact. And then concordance or concordancing, right? This is, of course, example is the process of looking at relationship among words, right? Then you have email pen pals, very important, of course, that if you have email, of course, on the internet you can have CVs of many people, in fact, and what you do that, you see, you can read those, you can get those emails, you can write, you can make your friends through email, and we call it email pen pals, right? And you can email them, you can write your message, and of course you can wait for the reply. And then we have chat lines, right? Quick messages, of course, and then there is thesaurus, right? So like shift F7 is a key if you want to see the similar words. Then companion websites. All these are some of the techniques that you can use, of course. That is internet treasure hunt, concordance or concordancing, a process of looking at relationship among words, email pen pals, chat lines, language learning websites, calls in classroom, see your, of course. So more you can see your what? Handbook that will have, of course, how can we use CAL in classroom. So what is internet hunt, my dear students? Of course, you see simple that you can, give a clue. So these are some of the techniques that can be used, right? Concordancing is one. Email pen pals, chat lines, voice chat, in fact, emails, websites, groups, social media, and so on and so forth. So students, in this lecture, what we talked about, my dear students, we tried to see how to use computer in language classroom, and we discussed that computer has become an important part for in our life, and so is the case in language teaching in the process and language learning process. Computer, if you use computer, particularly, of course, if you have access to internet and you know how to browse different websites, so your learning would be faster, right? And you would utilize your time, in fact, in the language learning process, and you could be more fluent, you could be more accurate, fine, in less time as compared to the other means of the traditional means are there. So we saw that any process in which the learner uses computer and as a result improves his or her language, right? This is important, and it is closely related to many other disciplines and computers. CAL is an important element of teaching and learning, and it has become integrated into research, right? And on in the practices of the general skills. CAL is a popular both in and out of the classroom, right? And there are some principles of using computer in language learning process or language teaching process. So we need to evaluate the appropriateness of the software program or computer-based resources, right? And then, of course, we need to see the authenticity of that software, authenticity of that program that you are using in language teaching, right? We need not to use any software which is not authentic. And I told you in the lecture that all websites, all softwares cannot be effective for your language teaching process, right? Government websites are considered useful, of course, if you browse a website of an organization for information that can be used. And also we need to see that the program that you are using in the language learning process, language teaching, is it really authentic or not? Do these materials relate to the experience of the learner or not? And then the feedback, of course, is important, that how does the feedback come? Does the feedback come there and then quickly, or does the feedback come through email or through other means? And then again, of course, when you use the CAL, you need to know the role of the teacher and of course role of the learner. It's important, right? And what is expected of the learner. Again, you see that once you see you use computer in language classroom, the role of the learner is equally important, right? The learner's role is that he should be motivated, and of course he should take keen interest in learning the language, and he should explore. He should be more constructive, right? That he should be following that constructive approach, that he should he should explore things. And you know, the computer is the teacher. The more you explore, the more you know, and the more you know, the more you learn, right? So that's why, of course, that you see this computer is a teacher, right? And of course, for language learning process, and I feel that it does more, right? And then what is expected of the teacher is equally important, that the teacher should be well versed in the program that he is using, and before bringing that program in the class, the teacher is supposed to in fact use that software, of course, on his own, right? And after using it, then he can take that program in the class. If he uses the program there and then in the class, so things can be out of control. Again, that of course is the program intended for self-study or classroom. Some softwares are there, they are for self-study, and some software are there, they are for what we call them, they are for the classroom activities. So we have to decide either this program is for the individual or the self-study, or this program is for the other activities. Technological appropriateness is also important. Does the program require extra hardware or software to make it work efficiently? Because earlier we discussed, while talking about the use of a course book for language teaching program, that the software that we use, technological appropriateness, does the program require extra hardware or software to make it work efficiently? This is very important. This is very important, in fact, that you see the hardware that you use for language teaching process, does it really work or not? Important, right? And then, my dear student, what do? You create an environment in which CAL is supported. Arrange the CAL classrooms to maximize interactions. This is important. Ensure easy access to call, in fact, right? And classroom techniques. See, we talked about internet treasure hunt, right? That of course you can give activities to the students that they can explore, they can hunt, and they can find out the activities, and of course, and they ask them to Google out all the options, right, and find out information. Then concordancing, in fact, finding relationship, of course, like there is a branch of linguistics which talks about this. We call it what? Corpus linguistics, right? That which words are being used. Then emails, in fact, they are equally important, right? Of course, ask students to get emails, make emails, in fact, and then exchange emails and make email pen pals, right? And then voice chat, again, is very important, very useful for language teaching process, and of course language learning process. Thesaurus, in fact, tell the students different hotkeys, how to find a thesaurus, in fact, how to find a similar words, right? And of course there are websites, of course, ask them to explore websites of different organizations, right? And get to know things. And there are so many language learning websites are there. Of course, they would like simply on Google, if you type this, that language learning websites, you will have a list of websites. I will show you some websites in the coming lectures as well. So then, in fact, what CAL in classroom? How can we use the computer in class? And of course, and we need to know that is it feasible to use in the classroom or not. So in this way, dear student, this is the time to say goodbye for this lecture. See you in the next lecture with another important area that will start. So it's a time to say goodbye. It's Allah Hafiz.